All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Heroes Mindset Podcast. Today, I have on Paul Cappuzzo, and we are going to talk about Marvel movies and most specifically the recent episode 6 of WandaVision. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. I would like to just let you know it is episode 8.
Did I say episode 8?
You said episode 6.
Why did I say episode 6? Well, so me and Paul are very close friends. He is one of my best friends. So, this should be a more fun conversation, especially since we're talking about Marvel movies. Oh my God.
I'm
So, what's up?
I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited. So, Paul is a Marvel movie fanatic, and I'm just really getting into Marvel and starting to understand the archetypes behind them. And I got to say, I am an absolute, I can't use that word. I love origin stories. I absolutely love origin stories. And there's so much, I guess, wisdom that you could take from them, and the fact that we could all, I guess, understands them because every single origin story has a piece of us. So I got to ask the question, especially since episode 8 is literally just WandaVision's origin story or Wanda's origin story. We got to ask the question, why do we like WandaVision? What is your theory? And why do we like Wanda in general?
Well, there's two different parts to me. First, I have to address like the nerd fan, just someone who's saw Iron Man in theaters in 2008 when they were 7 years old.
Mm.
Like, the fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, like in me is just like, you know, we've seen Wanda on screen since 2015, and we've gotten like nothing about her character. We've gotten like glimpses here and there. Like we know that Quicksilver was her brother. We knew that and he died in Ultron. We know that her parents were killed by a Stark missile. We knew that already. But we didn't know like the extreme details of it. And so episode 8 really allows us like an insight into who is Wanda. And the episode enters in with a lot of trauma. We're left off from episode 7 where we see Agatha Harkness, the nosy neighbor of sorts throughout the sitcom series, that she captures Wanda in her basement and makes her relive her trauma almost in like a therapy sort of way. And we don't know the what why she's making her do that until the real end. However, it's it allows for just a glimpse into the trauma of Wanda Maximoff. And so I think that's why a lot of us like connect with her character.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was a really interesting concept. How, first of all, why is it that the evil character is doing something good for her, right? Like we always think of therapy, we always think of like going deeper into yourself as like a good idea. But why is it that someone evil is trying to do that? It took me I was thinking about this for a while as I was watching the episode, and you know, well, it's just an interesting concept. Like you gotta see, when we think about like these two ideas, when you think about evil is something, how many people, in their lives call ourselves evil, right? Nobody really calls themselves evil, but at the same time, people do evil things, right? So for example, the act of betrayal. You don't really like know you're betraying in the moment. You don't like if you're in like sort of like a moral dilemma, like do I choose my friend or do I choose my partner? Like, any sort of moral dilemma, you don't really know that you're doing something evil until maybe after the fact. And you don't really feel that evil. So at some understanding, evil is really below the level of conscious awareness. Evil is below the level of understanding. So I think it's really cool how the things that are below the level of understanding really take Wanda deeper into her own self and help her understand herself a little bit more.
Well, I mean, just into that, quote about, doing evil things. There's a direct moment of that in the episode. After we see Wanda, with her parents being dead and the baby witch quote, then what's the next room she goes into? Well, she's brought into the Hydra facility where she was experimented on. And Agatha blatantly asks her, so your parents die and you join a Nazi terrorist
Hmm.
organization. And her response was, we want freedom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that I think that's a direct parallel to like what you were saying.
I thought that was so interesting when she did that because, yeah, I know it's like, well, you got to ask the question, like, was she doing something evil? And the answer is yes, but she was doing something evil without even knowing. She was too naive to even realize. And well, obviously I'm a big archetypes guy, right? Like this entire my entire understanding has to do with how do stories sort of parallel each other. And I thought it was really interesting that the story of Wanda was the same exact story as The Lion King. Crazy, crazy similarities. And it was actually the same story as Thor. So we'll actually go with Thor because obviously we'll stick in the Marvel universe. So what happens in Thor? Thor is born with a father that is righteous. He is, he's a good king and he's a really good father, right? And then um well, he starts to, obviously his dad dies, right? And this is Ragnarok, right? So his dad dies, and what automatically happens is he chooses a path because, well, now that his dad, I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out why it is that all superheroes' parents have to die, right? Like, what is that? Why is it that every single superhero's parent dies before, like, in the first few scenes of the movie? And what I've come to the realization is it's a symbol of independence, right? So once, for example, like, um, we'll say like Thor's parents die, that means he is no longer the heir to the throne. He's no longer his dad is no longer a hero anymore. He's the hero, right? And yeah, he could sort of, fulfill his hero's journey instead of his dad doing it.
Yeah, and if I can just interject, something similar, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a loved one that's dying. We go to Doctor Strange, for instance, right? And what
Mm.
happens in Doctor Strange? Well, Doctor Strange doesn't lose his parents. Doctor Strange is a 43-year-old man who happens to be a neurosurgeon. What does he lose? Well, he's in a car accident. He loses the one thing that he has, the ability to use his hands and be that neurosurgeon. So
Mm.
I think in order to become that superhero, it doesn't necessarily even have to be a parent. Just you have to lose something of extreme value to you.
Yeah, something that you hold dear, something that you've been depending on maybe your whole life.
Yeah, I mean, Hulk, for instance, right? Hulk is Bruce Banner, genius. He, 7 PhDs in the MCU. He's an absolute genius, and he loses that when he turns into the Hulk.
Mm.
So, just elaborating on that a little bit further, you don't have to lose a parent per se, but you have to lose something.
That's a very interesting take. So yeah, I like that. I mean, I think we all experience that. Like bring that into like human experience. I think we all experience that. Oh, there goes my camera. But I think we all experience that to some degree in our own lives. Like imagine, well, we could take this in WandaVision or Thor, pick one, right? They're the same story. And Wanda, she has, the thing that she depends on, her parents, everything's going well in her childhood, which I mean, unless you had a really, really awful childhood, at least you had parents to depend on, right? Or, friends or something, right? And well, then it all comes crashing down, right? And there's some point in all of our lives where that really happens. There was a great stat. It was 64% of all children have something known as an adverse childhood experience, which sums up a wide range of experiences. And when you have, it's like sexual abuse is obviously part of it. Family members with depression, family members with substance abuse, family members who are abusive, right? Things like that, and bullying, right? Like whenever you have these adverse childhood experiences, it's as if you were in like a perfect world, and then everything falls apart. And I was talking to this girl, Nicole Spindler, on my podcast a few weeks ago, and she goes, I had a great life. Like I was doing well, really no problems. I was really naive. And then what happened was my dad got cancer, 15 years old, right? And I'm sure I mean you have a very similar experience if you want to talk about that. And well, that's the naivety that just drops out and you really changes your personality.
Yeah, I think when you lose anything, you know y- we're born naive as humans, but
Yeah.
We grow into our experiences, but when you lose something, it's a, reality hits you in the face hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to say the least.
That's a good way of putting it. I think well, the question is, I think we all have had some sort of experience like that. And the question you must ask is, what do you do then? Right? Because you've been dependent on something your whole life. We'll take the Doctor Strange example because it's not only your parents, you've been dependent on your hands and your skills your whole life. And then you realize that you can't depend on that anymore. The fundamental belief that you had that was holding you up was is falls out from underneath you. It's like the floor sort of falls out from underneath, and it gives you a good way of understanding really why Wanda went into that facility, because she really had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, not even necessarily which facility, the Hydra facility.
The Hydra facility, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think of this as almost like a trichotomy of things, right? You have obviously the Doctor Strange approach where, he witnesses this, he doesn't witness, he undergoes this huge traumatic incident where he loses the only thing that he has. He pushes everyone away from him, but ultimately he becomes a good guy.
Yeah.
Right, he fights Dormammu and becomes a sorcerer supreme, and we know his story since in Infinity War, Endgame, and so on. Right.
Hmm.
Alternatively, you have the Thor perspective. What happens in Thor? Well, he first loses his mother in Thor 2.
Hmm.
He loses his friends in Ragnarok. He loses his father in Ragnarok. He lost the sister that he just found out about in Ragnarok. He loses his brother in Infinity War. And what's he do in Endgame? He gains like a ton of weight, becomes an alcoholic, reluctantly joins the Avengers, and that's his storyline. Now,
Yeah.
Thor 4 is coming out eventually. So we're going to see what happens with this character then. But you can go down that spiral and go through that traumatic loss of what I guess what demands to be a superhero is some sort of loss, and you can undergo that loss, and it depends on what you interpret it. So Strange becomes a hero, Thor becomes depressed and doesn't know how to deal with his grief, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's a good way of putting it. So I mean, when you really think about it, there's when you lose your parents, or when you lose the thing that you've been holding on to most dear, when you sort of the floor falls out from under you, the thing that you look for first in this place of chaos is structure, right? You need something to prop you up in this state because you are so vulnerable, right? Imagine like your parents just died, or something like that happens. You get a traumatic event and you are literally, well, there's a great archetype for it. You're stranded in the desert and you have no idea where to go. You know, it's a scary, scary way of viewing the world. And now you could sort of understand, that's exactly what happens with Thor, right? So Thor, he has no idea what he's going to do. So he automatically looks for something. And the first thing that he finds is a beer bottle, right? Which is unfortunate. Even in Strange, right? So what happens in Strange is his fundamental axioms of belief fall apart right away. What happens? He automatically travels to China or some Asian place and looks for some structure in spirituality, and he happened to pick right, but Thor just happened to pick wrong. And that's the same thing in the Lion King, right? Hakuna Matata. Hakuna Matata is obviously the wrong belief. No responsibilities, no all pleasure, no. It's exactly the same place where Thor went to. And well, that's where Wanda went. Wanda went to the place where there was some structure, right? Like where she feels like she could change the world, and it's not like everything is so fallen apart, but it was just the wrong place.
What, in terms of going back to Westview?
No, no, when she went to Hydra. Oh, and actually
Oh,
also when she goes to Westview, right? It's the same idea. She was in so much chaos that she literally couldn't take it. So she just added order just because, well,
you
to,
could.
to stop the pain, to stop the chaos.
Yeah. I mean, just on top of that, well, I think both examples are certainly potent, going to Hydra, literally getting some sort of order, even if it's a false kind of order.
Yeah.
And, going to Westview. I mean, she's literally creating that quote unquote order. Now, episode 9, the finale comes out next week, so we don't know how it quite ends yet. But like, she's definitely creating some sort of temporary order. She tried. I like to think that Wanda Maximoff is not evil per se. There's a comic storyline, House of M, where she's not necessarily the villain, but she can definitely be perceived as such,
Okay.
right? And this storyline is sort of based on House of M, but sort of not really. However, what I will say is that Wanda, when she goes to the sword headquarters to see Vision's body, had Vision not been dismantled, I do think that she wouldn't have done what she did not try to take the wrong path.
Yeah.
Like, she tried to just get closure. And when she was denied that closure is when she went down the wrong path. I think that she actively sought the correct path, but was denied of it.
Yeah. Well, that's the fundamental belief in the naive person who's committing evil, right? It's not her fault, right? Fault is a tough word, but I mean, she wasn't aware of the problem that she did, right? She created an entire universe, right? And she essentially, yeah, like she did something that created evil and added evil to the world, but she wasn't even aware of it. Like, she didn't even know that she was doing something that was evil. So to place fault on her is a tough thing, but at the same time, it's like, well, it just shows, like in our lives, we do things that we're not aware of doing, right? We do things that are bad, but we don't even know that they're bad. And, God, the amount of stories that I could throw in there, of the bad things that I've done. You look at middle school and high schools. I think everybody has that experience where, like, you say the wrong thing or somebody says the wrong thing to you, and they didn't really mean to hurt you, but it has an effect on you. Like, it really, really gets you. And I don't think people are trying to be evil, but they don't really understand the damage they could possibly do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm trying to think of another perfect example, Ultron, right? Like, I think that
Mm,
quite literally, Tony Tony, wants to put a suit around the world, I think is his quote.
yeah,
And he tries to do it. They create Ultron, and Ultron wants to kill humans,
yeah.
because he thinks that they're responsible for conflict. So I think that is just an also a representation of that.
That's scary, man. It's scary. I think that's one thing that I always worry about. I always worry about, especially in like Ultron, and especially in terms of, the idea of power, right? You look at, like, this idea of power always plays out in these Avengers movies, right? You could see it with the Infinity Stones. You could see it with all these heroes becoming heroes, You could see it with literally everything. Every time you have an increase in power, that power can always be used for bad as well as good. So we say Wanda was she was her powers were amplified by the Infinity Stones, and that's sort of what happens to our lives. In our lives, we our powers are amplified by the system that we're put in, and it's amplified by our maturity and the fact that we grow stronger and more intellectually complex. And well, what happens, right? The question is, that gives you more potential to do good, but it also gives you more potential to do bad. The same thing with the Infinity Stones. It gives you the potential to wipe out half the population while also giving the potential to, well, do good.
There was a quote about this from Vision in Civil War,
In Civil War, yep.
and I believe, to paraphrase, he goes, "The Avengers invite conflict. Conflict invites catastrophe." But we know the Avengers are the good guys, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're told, and that's the whole conflict of Civil War. We see that these Avengers are good guys. They save the city of New York from an alien invasion and also from Shield nuking the city. We see in Ultron that they tried to do the good thing in that they wanted to put a suit of iron around the world. It became a genocidal maniac robot.
Would
Um,
destroy an entire city.
exactly. We see we just see the quote unquote detrimental effects of good, and every source of good invites evil. Number one, but also number two, it invites some sort of catastrophe.
Mm. It's a good question that, I mean, I was really thinking about, you know, well, so there's this great quote that I read, in a success book, one of those self-help books that I used to be very big into those, and it was in a book called The 10X Rule, and the guy says in the book, he says, you know that you're succeeding when your problems are completed and then you move on to new problems, right? Like the idea of having problems is never going to go away. You will always have problems. And that was one of my big mistakes that I always made when I was a kid. I always said I wanted to work out, right? And I always wanted to go to the gym and work out like 1 hour a day every single day for the rest of my life, right? That was the whole idea. But I had this flawed belief, I had this flawed understanding of thinking that, okay, I will stop working out, or I will work out for the next 2 weeks and I'll really get my habits down. I'll really figure it out. And then after that, I'm not gonna have to worry about it anymore. After that, it's just gonna be set in, done deal, end of story. But the honest truth of that is like that's the naive falsity that we believe. We believe that, okay, maybe we could just end all these problems, but the truth is you're never going to end the problems. The problems are always going to keep coming.
Well, with innovation invites problem, right? That's the whole human experience, I guess.
No,
Uh,
it's true. It's
with
scary.
everything we invent, everything we innovate, everything we improve, it's going to invite a new problem.
Yeah, so I mean that's a good question. So to be honest, I don't know how to. I've been trying to analyze this. So there are multiple ways that you can analyze it, right? So me and you have read the book Republic. In the book Republic, Plato gives the theory that everything that could be applied to the state, to the government, to the society, could also be applied to the individual. You could take the same concept and boil it down to the individual. I don't know how I feel if I apply that to both of these concepts. So, for example, we have someone like Wanda, or we have someone like the Avengers, who are given these powers. And if we were to, and then there's the potential to do good and bad. When I look at that from a societal point of view, I say AI scares the crap out of me, right? Like when you look at something like AI, Elon Musk said on the Joe Rogan podcast, he said, we have lost the point of human control. Like AI, I don't know if you understand the basics of AI, but it's done on these things called neural networks. And essentially what happens is you try to tell this thing to recognize a bird, right? And every time it sees bird, it should say bird, right? And then eventually it should learn the fact like, okay, here's this type of bird versus this type of bird, right? And eventually it learns it, right? And it goes to these the way that they do it is they just teach it through trials. So they tell it, okay, they take a guess and they say bird or not bird. They say bird and they say either correct or wrong. And then they go through like millions of trials and eventually they succeed, right? And eventually they learn bird. But the problem with that is if you ask these people how it happens, like what are the mechanisms that happen inside of this AI, they will tell you they have no idea. Like the step from getting it to learn to getting it to the other end, they have no idea how to do it. And well, the thing is, eventually these AI bots are going to become so complex that they're going to beat humans potentially, right? And then humans aren't even going to know what happened because we still have no idea how to understand them. And well, I think that should scare everybody. And I would say on a societal level, I'm very scared of progress, right? I'm very scared of progress because it's the idea of well, it was Brave New World, but you could also imagine that idea where robots take over. I think everybody's sort of afraid of that. So on a societal level, it's like with the good, like we're experiencing the good right now. There's no doubt about that, you know. But with the good comes a tremendous lurking bad that might exist beyond the shadows. From an individual perspective, I would say that it's a good thing, which is really scary. So it's up to the interpretation. So when you say going progressing through, we'll say, your own self-understanding, you get to face deeper demons that exist within you, which from a therapeutic perspective is exactly what WandaVision is doing it in episode 8, and it's a good thing.
So I have a few things to say about that.
Sure, I just said a lot. So
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. When we talk about this idea of progress on the societal level, right?
Mhm.
Who's to say what is progress, right? Because there's always a finite balance of quote unquote power. Now, power can mean a variety of different things, but I suppose that we can, just for the best, definition purposes, we can sort of define that as the best sort of um, something that is, we can see as value, something that people can hurt by, something that people can be helped by,
Yeah.
right? So let's say, for instance, I go ahead and I innovate and I create a solar powered car,
Hmm.
right? And I'm the creator of the solar powered car. Well, societally, that's going to hurt ExxonMobil. That's going to hurt Shell. And, we can say, well, that's going to hurt the individuals of these companies. Well, we have to recognize these corporations, these groups of people, these interest groups are on a societal level. They're more than individuals. Individuals what foments a society, a group of individuals. So
Yeah.
under that lens, any form of progress, like so culturally and societally, is going to hurt somebody.
Mm.
And that can also be applied to the individual, right? Because I, as the individual who created the car, the solar powered car, is going to be hurting the bottom line of the CEO of Shell, the CEO of ExxonMobil.
Yeah.
Even, alternatively, we can apply that in terms of taxation, right? Let's use that, right?
Hmm.
If I recommend a plan that helps Joe Smith, right, and it
Hmm.
helps Joe Smith be put on food stamps, but it hurts the Koch brothers, or it hurts the Waltons, the CEOs of Walmart, um, well, that hurts them as an individual. So any form of quote unquote progress, well, that needs to be determined as to the individual, I suppose,
Mm.
and then be looked at.
It's an interesting philosophy. I mean, it's true, right? So, I mean, we were talking about this before. What you just described was the answer to the question, does a rising tide lift all boats? And we came to the conclusion, we could easily come to the conclusion based off what you just said, no, right? Because even if you have societal progress, aka some whatever flying cars or what solar cars,
Solar powered cars.
solar power cars, then somebody is going to take a hit, right? Somebody's going to take some sort of hit. The only thing I worry about, and this is a personal belief, is I fear. You've never seen Star Wars, but I'll yeah, I know.
Calling me out on your podcast. That's cool.
Every single person who's listening to this, please put in the comments, Paul, I cannot believe that you have not watched Star Wars. It's Star Wars. Like, whatever. But anyway, so in Star Wars Episode 3, there's a quote that has become almost immortalized. It was as the Republic, right, as the good guys were taken over by the supreme dictator, right, and you can imagine that's the analogous to Hitler taking over Germany, right, and the quote was from one of the good guys, right? It was Padme, where she says, "So this is how democracy dies, with a thunderous applause." Because everybody when the guy said he was going to be dictator, when Hitler rises to power, everybody cheered him on. Everybody was so happy for him until they realized that, which obviously must have been years later, that they just created a monster, right? And in the topic of solar powered cars, it sounds like there isn't too many potential catastrophic problems that could result from it. But in the case of, for example, AI, or let's see if there's any other ones. Nuclear power, right? Like, we created nuclear power for good, right? We created it to end world wars, and but God, right? Like, what potential catastrophes it could create, and well, that just, I bet you when we bombed, what was it, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, everybody in America was clapping, but they had no idea what was going to happen when the Cold War came around.
I think that's yeah, I think the the application of that Star Wars quote. I actually didn't know that was from Star Wars. Look at me not watching that movie. But no, I've heard that quote before. And yeah, no, I think that's a phenomenal application of that quote. You know, with every good thing or every good thing, because who's to define what that is from nine? I guess we as individuals can, but who's to say people are going to agree?
Yeah,
Um, with every good thing that comes about, people are going to applaud, but people are also going to be hurt by it because that ability, as I described, the ability of power and the ability of quote unquote power, the definition of you can be hurt, but you can also be helped by whatever we wanted to define that as for the sake of just this discussion. Power, people are going to be hurt by it, and power is finite. It's like a pie. You can only take so much of it. You can
yeah.
take from other people, but you can only take so much of it. It can't be expanded. So people are going to be hurt. People are going to be helped. People are going to have that thunderous applause. People are also going to be in guillotines and have their be hung as a result of certain policies, or be bombed, or regardless. So definitely interesting discussion. Yeah.
Well, so can you sum up exactly what happens in WandaVision? So what harm has she actually done when she created this world? What harm did she do with her power?
So this is where I get to theorizing because we don't know yet exactly.
So
Um,
this whole first 8 episodes is just we are in the parallel universe. We have not stepped out of it yet.
so it's not even necessary. So let me start with like episode one. Let me break it down a little bit,
Let's
right?
see what you got.
So in episode one is like pure sitcom, right?
Hmm.
However, you might have noticed because you just finished watching episode eight, right?
Hmm.
You noticed how when Wanda and Pietro were underneath the bed after the bomb went off, you saw
Hmm.
that blinking light on the Stark bomb, right?
Yes.
Red blinking light. Well, the whole first episode of WandaVision is in black and white. There's a commercial though; it's also in black and white. And I say commercial; it's in it was a made as part of the TV show.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a real commercial, but it was a commercial. It was in black and white for a Stark toaster, and there's one color. It's the same blinking red light as the
Hmm.
Stark Industries bomb. And what's the same sound? It's the same exact sound that the toaster's making. And the toaster has a delay before it goes off. So even in the first episode, we're like, huh, this whole episode's black and white, but there's a hint of red.
Yeah.
What's happening? So you're already getting that hint of her trauma in the first episode, but you don't quite know it yet.
What the hell? I did not notice that. That is so cool.
In the second episode, right, we see another commercial. This time it's for a Strucker watch, right? Who's
Okay.
Strucker? The person who experimented on Wanda. That's the name of this giant, the genius or scientist rather, who's experimented on her, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And what's on the watch? The Hydra logo. There's another commercial in episode 7, I believe it was, right? Called Nexus. And you see though, and now this is where we get to like color and stuff, and it's based on like The Office and Modern Family, like that kind of show, or Malcolm in the
Yeah.
Middle, whatever it was, right? And it's in color, and those like antidepressant ads that you see on TV.
Yeah.
The Nexus is an antidepressant pill, and
Okay.
it's create your own reality.
Mm,
And so every sitcom episode has a direct commercial that relates to her like trauma.
that's so interesting. So let's see if we could break that down. So for the first one, right, the blinking light, obviously there's a symbolic aspect behind it. And this is probably episode 2 with the toaster, right? That has the blinking light, that has the mark of Stark Industries, you could say, which brings progress, right? The toaster obviously brings progress. Toasters do good for people, they make convenient food. With that also comes bombs, right? Like the same technological progression can also use bombs, and the same goes with episode 2 with Hydra. The same people that are going to do things that help people, right, are also going to be the ones to experiment on people and create Hydra. um what was so the seventh one was create your own world. I think, okay, here's a point of discussion that I really, really wanted to get into. And well, I think we really need to explain, or at least try to come up with an answer as to what the hell this entire thing means. What does it mean that she's creating her own world? Like, do we create our own world in our lives, or is this just like some thing that exists outside that we're just sort of watching?
I think that's a really good discussion, and I think that this would be better to if I knew how episode 9 ended, I think I'd be able to tell you a better answer.
Why?
Because I think that we're going to get this explained more in episode.
Hmm.
The show has a lot of answers that a lot of questions it needs to answer in its last episode. There's a lot to discuss. For instance, her brother came back from the dead,
Hmm.
but
So
her
did
brother,
Vision.
what?
So did Vision, right?
So did Vision.
Yeah.
Vision was like is dead, and they
Yeah.
ripped him apart in the sword facility. But she like literally made him. He is. She created the most powerful being in existence. Created an Infinity Stone with her mind.
Hmm.
That is, when we talk about creating her own reality, she's taking that to the far extreme. She's literally creating the most powerful thing in reality.
Well, here's the question: does it actually have an influence on reality? Right. So she created an Infinity Stone, but you could say it was like a dream, right? Like you could say this dream doesn't have any effect on reality.
So that's what we don't know, and there's two reasons. One of the answers I can answer, one of them I can't yet.
Let's see
Right.
what you got. Yeah.
So when we talk about the effects that it does not have on reality, well, Vision in episode 6, the Halloween episode, the 90s
Hmm.
episode, he tries to leave the hex. The hex is, the thing that Wanda creates, the sitcom hexagon that encapsulates Westview,
Okay.
right? Because Vision gets really suspicious. He does his power where he can mind tap into different beings and basically free them from Wanda's control, right? So we
Yeah.
see this phenomenal scene with a coworker of Vision in episode 6 named Norm, right?
Hmm.
And Norm is like, "Help! She's keeping us all hostage here,"
Yeah.
right? And Vision and Wanda have this big fight at the end of episode 5. In episode 6, Vision goes off, tries to escape the hex, right?
Hmm.
As he's escaping the hex, he is literally being pulled back in. He cannot escape. He is falling apart. He collapses to his knees as he takes a few steps out,
Hmm.
collapses to his knees, and literally pieces of him, like figments of him, are being pulled back into this hexagon.
Wow.
So when we talk about things that, are not shaped in the reality, Vision might not be reality. That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Well, that's
However, what?
well, so let me give you the archetype there. This was an archetype. Let me see if I could. Yes, yes, it was in Thor Ragnarok, and it's also in The Lion King. It's also in Star Wars, which you didn't watch, but you know, but I mean, it's the idea. Oh, it's also in Black Panther, right? Where the hero goes for a minute to see their dead parent, dead, whatever, right, lover, and you see that in Black Panther, right? He takes a drink and he sees his father, the realm of the ancestors. You see that in what was it, Lion King? That's Hamlet, right, where he sees the ghost of his father. See that in Thor, where Thor sees his father, and well, the analyst in me would just say these are just projections, right? These are just the projections that we have of our parents, of the people who gave us wisdom, and we get to sort of, they're a part of us, like even if our parents, like my parents die sometime in the future, they're still going to be a part of me. Their wisdom's still going to live on within me, and that's the lesson that I normally take from it.
So when we talk about projections, right? In this instance, yes, Vision is very clearly some sort of projection.
Hmm.
Um, However, as I said, her brother is back, right? Her brother died in Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
However, for those like in the audience or even you, if you don't know this, there's two Marvel universes. There's a Marvel Cinematic Universe, the one with Iron Man, the one with the Avengers movies, Guardians, and all of those. And then there's the Fox Marvel Universe. right? Which consists of the X-Men and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And in X-Men, there's a character named Quicksilver, which also happens to be in the Marvel universe, like the MCU version, right? One is played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's the one in the MCU, and the other one is played by Evan Peters, he's the one in the X-Men universe.
Okay.
Aaron Taylor Johnson's character died in Age of Ultron, right?
Yeah.
Well, in WandaVision, in one of the episodes, I think it was episode 4, uh we hear a doorbell, right? And Wanda goes to the door, see what's happening. It's Evan Peters Quicksilver.
Huh.
So it's Quicksilver that has all the memories of Quicksilver from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like the Avengers universe, but it's being played by the actor who played Quicksilver in the X-Men universe. So Agatha sort of explains this. Now I think we're getting a further explanation next episode, which is why I can't give like a definitive answer,
Uh-huh.
right? But Agatha's explanation is that she brought him back, Agatha did, and try to, I guess, trick Wanda or try to understand the powers, because there's a scene in the Halloween episode where Quicksilver asks Wanda, "So how do you do this? How did
Yeah.
you do this? Like bring everyone here and how did you fix all of this? And how did you create this reality?" And she says, "I don't know." Wanda does. And then ultimately we see in the therapy episode, as we're calling it, Agatha sort of, makes Wanda relive those experiences so she can figure it out. But we then realize like the whole time that Agatha was actually controlling Quicksilver. So we do not know if, similar to Vision, that Quicksilver will like dissolve once he leaves the Hex, or if he's going to continue to exist. Now, the nerd in me is sort of saying that no, he's going to have to live, because you wouldn't cast a totally new actor
Mm.
from a different and make all the nerds theorize like myself and not give him a future in the universe. So when we see Vision, yeah, he's a projection, but what about Quicksilver?
Huh. I mean, I would say from a psychological perspective, obviously, that's I don't have the Marvel fandom that you have, and from my point of view, it would seem almost impossible for him to come back to life, because I mean, what would be the explanation for it, right? I mean, they have the multiverse, don't they?
Yeah, that's sort of where I think they're
I,
going with it.
I still haven't been able to figure out the archetypes behind the multiverse. It's like, what, like you could just travel throughout time, and they kind of helped us out a little bit with that in Ant-Man, right? Because that was the biggest explanation of going through and getting lost in the multiverse, but it's still just heavily misunderstood.
Well, luckily for you, WandaVision might explain it in episode 9, but if not, we have Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness.
Oh,
So,
that's gonna be awesome. That's gonna be really cool. But anyway, so I wanted to get back to the question we were talking about before. So, do we create our own worlds? Is that something that happens? And I sent you a video before, and I think it's a very common and popular video that I really really like. So it's called the Monkey Business Illusion. And for anyone who's listening and doesn't know what it is, I highly suggest you test yourself out for it. But at the same time, I'll just explain it to you right now. Spoiler alert. But what happens is there's a group of people, right? It's black shirts and white shirts, and the experimenter says something simple. He gives you a goal. He says, "Hey, count the amount of times the black team passes the ball to each other," and the answer is something like 16. And you say 16, and you feel really good about yourself because you said 16, you got it right. And then the experimenter turns to you and says, "Did you see the gorilla?" And you say, "What gorilla?" Right? And you would automatically think that, okay, like, I did my job and everything is going well, and you understood the entire thing. But really what happened was there was a gorilla, a man dressed in a giant gorilla suit, that walked in the middle of the frame in a giant gorilla suit, pounded his chest, and walked out. And 50% of people didn't notice it. You know, a fascinating idea. First of all, because you figured our predatory systems in our brain would say, wait, that's a gorilla there, right? Like the same feature that detects like, snakes and like whales and stuff, sharks. Like you figured that it would detect an ape, but we just didn't, you know. And well, first of all, the first lesson you can take from it is it shows how ignorant we are. We are so ignorant of the world around us because when we get so focused on a goal, right, we lose sight of everything else around us. We lose sight of, first of all, the white team. Did you count how many times the white passed? And also the giant gorilla that's walking in the middle of the room that nobody freaking noticed. And well, if you want to look at it from a truth perspective, from a political perspective, I really like, you could say the right and the left, are they both right? And the answer is yes, they could literally be both right. And the the Democrats were just looking at the black shirts and the white teams were both looking at the white shirts, and they both came up with different answers on the same set of facts, the same set of truth. And that's to be explained by confirmation bias, right? Confirmation bias is exactly that idea. Not only do we not see the whole world, but we see the world that we want to see. Which is the scariest part. So not only are we ignorant about the entire facts of the story, but we only just pick out the facts that we really want to see that support our entire agenda, and that is scary in of itself. So to conclude that, we kind of do make up our own world.
Yeah, I was about to say I do completely agree. I think that we do ultimately wind up creating our own world, even if not to the extent of Wanda Maximoff, where we go ahead and create our own sitcom little universe. But we stick around. We don't want it to to relate this to the politics because I do dabble in that occasionally.
No, listen,
Um,
if you have something interesting to say, this is the place to say it.
I do dabble in that occasionally. So yeah, absolutely. When we talk about this confirmation bias in politics, right? I think we tend to dismiss, or we're very tribal in our politics since the Bill Clinton impeachment, I would say, and we've escalated tremendously since. um you know Only during times of national crisis do we unify, and even now that's being tested with COVID.
Yeah.
um so that's a whole different discussion. However, what I will say is, we tend to be very animalistic, very tribal. We say blue team good or red team bad, or red team good, blue team bad, and we associate ourselves with these, teams. I'm a Democrat, so every Democrat is good and Republican bad, or every Republican good, every Democrat bad. We're very primal
Us versus them. Yeah.
yeah, us. We other the other party. It's
Hmm.
this process of othering, and um, we create these caricatures of our opponents in that way.
Yeah.
We say all Republicans must be white supremacist Nazis who loves the Second Amendment and attend church every Sunday and praise Donald Trump to no end. Right?
Well, it's funny because like that is somewhat true, right? Like if you were to look at the facts and if you were to only look at the news, right, and if you were to only look at the news of the radical Republicans and all the Trump lovers and all that stuff, if you were to compile only that truth, right, using your confirmation bias, you could actually come up to the conclusion somewhat, right, that that is the case. That maybe not all Republicans are white supremacists, but you could give something like that general framework using the truth that is biased towards your view.
Yeah. We take the few examples. So, for instance, let's go to 2017 Charlottesville, or we can use 2021 January 6th, right? We can use either one of those events, and we can take these incidents of white supremacy and bigotry and not neo-Nazism and QAnon, and regardless of what conspiracy or what supremacy organization you want to call it, right? It's we take those examples, those incidents, and if you already want to believe that the other side bad, my side good, and there's in those primal animalistic sense, right? you are going to go ahead and apply those few instances and say it's happened more than once, so therefore it must be true.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it goes, it's funny because I listen to a lot of people on the right too. And, when I listen to the people on the right, they do the same exact thing to the left. And the things that they say are true, man. Like the things that they say are literally true. It's like, some of these people want to add communism, Nazism, not Nazism, socialism, they want to raise up the dead and do blah 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 and all these bad things about the left, and it's true, right? Like to some degree it is true, and but to some degree it's false. I think we got to realize that, to some degree we take the truth and then we add our little extra layer on it. We add our little, you say people on the right are white supremacists. People on the right are white supremacists, but then you add a layer and saying all people on the right are white supremacists. That's where you have a falsity on top of the truth, and that's where you create your own little world.
Well, I think I forgot who said this, there's someone who said this, but every lie is built upon truth.
Mm.
And I don't agree with that to the fullest extent. I don't want to take that to the extremes, because I do think some lies are built upon egotistical motives or things like that, right? I disagree with that quote as like it stands by itself. But I mean, yeah, if we want to talk about most lies are built upon truths, I would say, yeah, you need some foundation.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that's really scary. It's like, and well, this goes back to the idea that you're saying, right? Where you talk about foundation, we were talking about before that Wanda had the floor cut out from under her and she's falling, right? She is in literal chaos as she's falling. And what is the thing that she looks for? She looks for a structure. She looks for a foundation, right? That's the thing that she needs. And that's why she creates her own little world. That's why she distances herself from reality.
Well, even throughout the episode, right? We learn that, what's a constant in Wanda's life? Apparently it's sitcoms, right? Um, what was she watching as her house was blown up?
Dick Van Dyke Show.
Dick Van Dyke. What was she watching immediately after being experimented on? A sitcom. What was she watching with Vision in the Avengers compound? A sitcom. And what does she turn her whole life into? A sitcom. So that is a literal representation of the structure, the foundation, that solid being that acts as a support beam for her,
Yeah.
becoming her reality.
So now we must ask the question, because this is a question that I've been listening to a lot of lectures lately, and Jordan Peterson, he talks about this. He talks about whether or not this structure is good, because he's a clinical psychologist. And what he says is, in your life, if you're struggling with, for example, chaos, right? You feel like the floor is falling off from under you. He says most of the reasons why people come into therapy is not because they have some sort of mental illness, right? It's not because of anxiety, depression, whatever. It's because their life, their brain, their situation is so damn complicated. Like they have so many variables going off in so many directions that they are so confused. They are literally, it's as if the floor has always been pulled out for them and they are constantly falling, constantly trying to figure out. And then it manifests itself in anxiety, depression, and all these things. So the problem itself is not anxiety, depression. You can't just give them pills of serotonin and say, hey, listen, here's your antidepressants. Good luck, right? You need to figure out, oh, yes, how to get a stable job and how to form relationships and all these things.
Well, let's go apply it to Wanda really quickly, like again, right?
Yeah.
What's her whole story? Well, her parents die, Quicksilver dies, Vision dies twice. Um, she loses her mentor, who was Steve Rogers, after he presumably dies.
Yeah.
After he turns old in Endgame, so she loses everyone very important to her besides Clint, but we don't know where Clint is at this point. But what else happens? Well, in Civil War, the Lagos incident happens where they're fighting Crossbones and some other Hydra goons, and she blows up a building
Yeah.
trying to save everyone. So it goes back to that thing of good is going to implement bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so she blows up everyone, and there's a commercial in the show, right? I think this is in the third episode, and it's for Lagos branded paper towels. And the quote at the end of the commercial is clean up a mess, regardless of how big, Lagos.
Mm.
And so, that's just represent like there's this red spill on the counter, and the Lagos paper towel cleans it all up. And I think that's like a clear, just message about, what we're talking about here.
Yeah, well, it's a good message of foundation and structure, right? That was a great segue into what I was about to say. So thank you. Actually, so he says, you have these axioms, you're falling through chaos, right? You're falling into this chaos, and you have a spill, let's say, right? A spill is also a good representation of chaos, right? With Lagos. And what do you need? You need structure. You need some sort of structure. And well, Jordan Peterson says, he goes, it doesn't even matter um what type of psychological theory you apply to them. You could apply, just the traditional psychological theory. You could apply Freud. You could apply Jung. You could apply Rogers. You could apply Piaget. You could apply all these different psychological theories in your therapy session, and they will start to adopt it. So what ends up happening is, Jung, so we'll go with Freud because Freud's popular. Freud looked at the world in a particular sort of way, right? Like, do you know Freud?
Know of him.
Yeah, so Freud was just a crazy psychologist who had these crazy theories, but he was, he created psychoanalysis. So he is and he popularized the idea of the unconscious. So he's very, very successful. And some people still use Freud as their as the structure in which they view the world, right? And in which they teach their clients. And Peterson says, no matter what structure you give them, no matter what of these 7 psychologists, or as many as there are theories you give them, it will help them no matter what, just because of the fact that it gives them structure, right? They're not falling anywhere. At least they have something to sit upon. Then what ends up happening is, we'll say Freud looked at the world in a particular sort of way. They start to view the world in Freud's way, right? In the manner in which the structure that has been given to them. And they start to, they start to see things, they start to see a new truth that emerges to them through the new structure that they've been given. And well, it just shows, like, you ask the question, there are, we'll say, 7 different psychological theories that you could use. Which ones would have worked? We'll say maybe all 7 of them. But depending on which theory you actually gave them, they will see the world in 7 different ways, and they will interpret everything that happens to them in these 7 different particular ways. And in that way, they literally create a new, different way of looking at the world.
That's interesting. So it almost seems as if structure under, this, perspective is to the way we're told it is.
Explain
Um,
that.
so I guess that was bad phrasing on my behalf, but that
Try
was,
again. No, we're good.
let's go ahead and try that again. Structure. So we can view structure under those 7 different approaches, right? However, if we're told to view it under X, right, whereas another person tells us to view it under Y, are we capable of seeing both?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
So his answer would be yes, right? Like, there are all 7 of these structures are proven air quote psychological theories that are based in reality. So since they're all based in reality, yes, all of them would somewhat work.
Let's go ahead and apply that to Wanda really quick.
Let's do it.
Right. Wanda has her clear reality. She has been through a lot. Her husband just died, or boyfriend, whatever they were, right? Robot wife, I don't know, whatever. Just died in Infinity War, and she's had no time to process this grief. To her memory, she being dusted in the Marvel universe as she was in Infinity War. You are brought right back to where you were, and you have no resemblance of the time that was passed.
5 years.
She does not have that 5 years. Like, she does not know 5 years passed. Right? So she goes into that sword facility with that mindset of, oh, okay, I just want to bury him, get it over with, and be done. And when she's told that she can't, she obviously goes ahead and creates this whole reality. So what happens? Because I think she's starting to come to this understanding that the reality is bad. Because under in episode 7, there's a sword agent or a former sword agent named Monica who goes in.
Okay.
And Monica is the daughter of Captain Rambeau from Captain Marvel. So she has like those heroistic ties or heroic ties rather from Captain Marvel.
Oh, it's the little girl.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, she's like 20 something, and so she goes in to tell Wanda, your reality is trapping thousands of people.
Yeah.
They cannot like live on with her life. And Wanda almost snaps out of it until Agatha like sort of like brings her back in and sort of almost takes her under control again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you have that reality of Wanda versus the other reality of Wanda who wants to keep up this false narrative, right?
Mhm.
I think that's going to be interesting.
Well, that shows, I'm actually working on lecture right now, and one of the lectures I'm working on is trying to understand the different personalities and how they sort of clash. Because I mean, you look at it, it's like a fundamental debate that we have every day. It's like the devil on your shoulder versus the angel on your shoulder, right? And that's really what she's struggling with. And I think man, don't we all have that? Don't we all have, in our daily lives, you got to ask the question, should I go and watch TV for 2 hours? Should I go on, scroll on TikTok for 2 hours? Should I go and just, pick whatever it is? Should I go and smoke? Should I go and, eat 9 donuts? Like whatever, like, and you're that's the devil on your shoulder. And then, then you're faced with, should I do something productive, or should I spend time with my family, or should I do whatever? And we're hit with that question every single day of our life. And part of the question that they ask is, should I face reality or should I avoid reality? And that's the question that Wanda's struggling with.
Yeah, and I think not for necessarily this discussion, but if anyone wants to further this discussion outside of this podcast, something to ought to look into is what are the social and material conditions that make someone pick the bad versus the good,
Mm,
because those are certainly influences.
yeah.
Material condition certainly an influence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally have a very big affinity. No, affinity is the wrong word. I have a very strong criticism of Christianity. In Christianity, obviously, you might not be Christian, but the American culture is built upon Christianity, so it has a strong root in your beliefs, even if you don't know it. And I would say this is also a problem with American culture. We are a very repressive culture. We are a very repressive culture. We repress all of our emotions, and we say, okay, I'm feeling this feeling. Maybe I shouldn't be feeling this feeling. So I just won't. And then, I'm going to sort of push past it, right? And then I'm just going to move on with my life. But then eventually what ends up happening is you feel it, right? It's sort of like the bottling up effect where everything goes into the bottle, and you fill it up too much and then it all splurges out. That's rage, right? You can imagine that an angry outburst or an anxiety attack. An anxiety attack is literally what happens when you have one problem and then you don't handle it properly, so it just sort of stays as a problem, and then you add another problem and then another problem, then another problem, and then your floor falls out from
I am literally thinking of what happens to Wanda when you say
it.
literally, she pulls out to that plot of land where presumably during Infinity War, Vision gave her that deed. And before Infinity War happened, rather, and they were going to build their home there.
Yeah.
And he dies, and she's reminded of that as she pulls into that plot of land. It doesn't have a home. And she falls to her knees and creates this reality. It's that rage.
Yeah, it's like the embodiment, sort of like the perfect symbol of not being able to take it anymore, right? Like, isn't that really what it is when you create your own reality? Isn't that what happens? We could go back to, the political example. When you say, I am going to not focus on the entire facts, but only the facts that I care about, you are literally creating your own world so that you don't have to face the struggle of the actual reality, right?
And
Like you don't have to face the idea that your ideas might be wrong.
I want to quickly defend that, because I don't think in all instances I don't think that it's most people at least. I don't know. I just want to defend that.
No, no, I mean maybe it's not, but
I think that there's an instance where people subscribe to what they believe, not to in like strong positions of like subscription where they say all are X. Well, when you
mhm,
associate all with something, that's a strong position.
yeah.
Um, but I don't think they do that to be necessarily ignorant or just not to consider the other side.
Hmm.
I also think there's a sort of you know people don't understand how to interpret things correctly. In literacy and media literacy as like a really low point. And people will read a story and they won't know how to interpret the other side,
Hmm.
or they just won't see the other side whatsoever. Or perhaps they recognize both sides of something. However, they recognize the other side is so outlandish and so foolish, because I do think there are positions we ought to recognize as foolish
Yeah.
and ridiculous. Um, we shouldn't take the person who says the sky is purple seriously. Um, but so I think that there's a line that we don't necessarily know where to draw in terms of, do we take them seriously, or do we take the guy who says that the sky is green seriously?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we struggle with that every single day. If you're worrying about, first of all, I agree. I agree, right? Like this is the biggest problem with social media. With social media, I think you were the one who was telling me this. There was a site where you could go on sort of like this fake Twitter profile and you could click, and it would say, what would my Twitter feed look like if I was a liberal, Democrat, white supremacist, communist, blah, 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 blah. And you click through it and you scroll through your Twitter feed, and literally the facts that you were given are not, well, they're manipulated facts, right? So if for example, we're saying you are making a mistake in saying that all Republicans are enemies and all Democrats are heroes, or the other way around, right? And you give them that us versus them, that other that you were speaking about. Well, what if all the facts that you're hearing only paint the Republicans as enemies and Democrats as heroes, and it gives humanity to Democrats, but it doesn't give humanity to Republicans.
I think just to alter, there's this famous Kellyanne
Kanye. Oh.
Kanye, yeah, Kellyanne Conway quote from 2017 or 2018 when she was working for the Trump administration, and she makes a point saying, they're alternative facts, and we
Mhm.
know that not to be true,
Yeah.
right? If the president says the sky is purple, it's blue. There's no need to discuss that, right? But there's certainly alternative realities.
Explain.
We all perceive our own reality differently. We construct notions of reality to fit our agenda, to fit our biases, and to fit what we want to be reality. Not even necessarily if the facts stack up against us, right? For instance, let's say I'm a purple sky truther, right? And
Yeah.
I say the sky has to be purple, right?
Hmm.
And every scientific report comes out saying, well, Paul, it's actually blue, right?
Hmm.
Get out of here. I don't trust science.
Hmm.
Where's the report that says it's purple? See, there's an obscure report on this website that says purpleclouds.com, and that's where I'm getting my information from. So we will look to confirm any of our biases. We will construct these realities of our own biases, and that's where it becomes a problem because
Yeah.
we are constructing our own reality.
Yeah. So you're saying that not only do we not accept truth, not only do we, we see 10 facts and only choose the five that we want to see. We take the five that we want to see, and then we add five more facts that are illogical and false.
Yes, let me give an example because I'm a leftist, for the lack of better words. I'm a registered Democrat, but let me go ahead and just say this about like Democrats, for instance, right? The whole time that Trump was president, they said the kids in cages is awful,
Yeah.
right? Well, Joe Prime currently implemented a new facility and put kids in cages.
Really.
Or what about they said these bombings that Trump does is awful, and yeah, I agree. The bombings that the Trump administration did awful. under the Obama administration, he increased it by over 400%. Right?
Yeah.
What does Joe Biden do? Illegally bombed Syria the other day. Right?
Yeah.
And so when we go ahead and they recognize that happened, but they said, we'll write it off though, because it's our guy.
Yeah. No, we did the same thing on the right, man. Like on the right, I'm a big debt guy. I really care about the national debt, as you know. And everyone's like, oh my God, Obama's really expanding the national debt. This is such a scary thing. Like, we really shouldn't be doing this, which he did, true. And then Trump does it, and then everybody turns their head, you know. I think it's something that really changes the way that you look at the world, because you will literally, I don't know if that's creating your own reality when you do that, but it's something like that.
I think there's a difference between creating your own reality and creating your own and being inconsistent. Um,
Yeah.
I think that is just an example of inconsistency.
Well, by
But
inconsistency, we also say, we actually turned a blind eye towards it,
yeah,
right? So I bet you the people on the left, if they see something about Biden illegally bombing Syria, this is actually a great example. I was talking to one of my, not even gonna say the relationship, but I was talking to somebody, and I said, you know, we were talking about Trump and how he has all these rape allegations against him. I said, hey, listen, Biden has a very serious rape allegation against him. And according to a lot of the values on the left, you got to say, listen, I believe her, right? I believe her is like something that was really huge in the Kavanaugh case that everybody was going crazy about. And then this woman with pretty good credibility, she comes out, what was her name?
Tara Reid.
Tara Reid. She comes out and she says, hey, listen, not Trump, Biden sexually assaulted me. And, this is something that potentially should be sending him to jail. And I told that to this person, and they say, that's just stop. Like, stop. That's just the media trying to get to him. That
Yeah, and I think that so when we go ahead, and I think you alluded to this, but we both missed the mark when we said it. One of us should have stepped in. I
what?
think those cases of inconsistency, right? Because that is inconsistent logic,
Mm-hmm.
right? But both of those cases, and allowing us to turn that blind eye, well, our eyes are the thing that create our reality. And if
Yeah.
we're therefore turning a blind eye to something, that is helping and aiding in the construction of that reality.
Yes. Yes. This is perfect. Keep going. Keep going.
And thank you. And when we go ahead and we keep constructing this reality where blue team good, red team bad, or regardless, so it could be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you refuse to take criticism, and the inability to implement criticism or even respect criticism
Mm-hmm.
is going to be the thing that acts in the othering process. And
Yeah.
this act of othering is, not even just colonial, but it's also something that exists in these contemporary politics. We see it. Every Trump supporter is a racist bigot who supports a demagogue. Now, I happen to believe that Trump is a racist bigot, right? But that's regardless. Not every Trump supporter is a racist bigot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them just want their jobs back, and Trump promised that. Now, do I think that personally, like they just didn't see past the facade that he was putting up, this con man show case?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because they saw a reality and they constructed their own reality, or perhaps they were willing to ignore his faults. They were willing to ignore his 26 rape allegations. They were willing to ignore his consistent shows of racism, with dating back to the Central Park Five, right? They were willing to ignore all those things to create their own reality and create their own perspective of who he is.
Yeah.
And same thing with Joe Biden. I take a lot of problems with Joe Biden, but Democrats were willing to, as you alluded to with the sexual assault stuff and Me Too, right? The
Yeah.
founder of the Me Too movement, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she didn't address the Tara Reid situation whatsoever.
Huh.
And just that's mind-boggling to me. It's okay, it's the okay if my team does it, bad if the other team does.
Yeah.
And we see these consistent constructions of our own reality to confirm what we already believe, or what we want to believe. Not even what we already believe, but what we want to believe.
You want to hear something interesting? So I had this guy on my podcast. His name was Andrew Weaver. He's a professor at Indiana University, and what he talks about is the oh, was it the emotions of morality or the philosophical roots of morality? No, the psychology of morality. That's what it was.
Mhm.
He talks about the psychology of morality and how do we form our morals? How do we form our values? How do we form essentially the world that we create? And he found that morals, right? The things that we call morals. So, for example, I have a moral stance against the dairy industry. I really don't like the dairy industry, the way they treat the cows, all of these things. And this is just a lighthearted example, and or I guess somewhat. And he says that morals in his studies, he has proven, that morals are constructions of emotions, not logic.
Mhm.
They're constructions of the way that we feel about things, not the way that we actually reason. And then what happens is we have this sort of circling back effect where, for example, in my case, I was I watched one of those videos and I was very sympathetic for the cows. I saw a sense of, I'm not going to say humanity because that's a very specific term, but I saw a sense of soul inside of them as as the abuse happened. And what ended up happening was then I circled back, I made my moral position, then I circled back and said, okay, here's my logical position to support it, which is, they shouldn't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. And what he told me when I told him that is he goes, just as well, a person on the other side could have created a logical argument for you, right? I say cows have value. Other person on the other side says cows don't have value. They're not humans. Both are logical arguments. Both are somewhat true. But what is the difference in what our beliefs are, in our values, and our morals? It's the underlying emotion behind it, right? One person sees food, one person sees soul. And well, that's the difference, right? The difference comes in your emotions. It does not come in your actual logical reality.
I think that goes back to something I was alluding to earlier, where we said that most things, I didn't say all, I said most have a underlying truth.
Yeah.
And but it's a matter of whose truth. And to wrap this all back around in one nice discussion, it goes back around to what we were talking about earlier with Republic, right? These forms of what is true. And I suppose
Mm.
it's the Theramarchus argument. It's of the eye of the beholder. We construct these truths to fit our narrative, and we'll utilize whatever we can to uh, implement them.
That's a great way of ending it. I like that. So we gotta ask the question to end it. What is truth? Is the truth that we are living in the actual truth? And is it the whole truth? Right?
Let me pose this question, and this is a meaty discussion that we most certainly do not have time for,
Well, I
because
will. All right, I will end it right after this. Done. Right on the cliffhanger.
can we have truth? Does truth exist?